Yeah. All
Okay.
right, we're good.
Welcome everybody to the Critiquery. Today we're going to critique a piece by Jared. The piece is called Stalling Red Light. Scroll up. Red light. Okay, that was it. Red light. All right, so we're going to follow the normal procedure where we go around. Everybody will say, you'll have about a minute, if you can keep it under a minute. Say at least one positive thing, something you liked, and at least one thing you'd like to discuss that could be room for improvement or something you want to talk about during our discussion. So, as always, we'll start with Brad.
Oh, I'd love to say it's not fair or something, but that's fine. It's alphabetical, I guess. Yeah, I enjoyed the speech. I enjoyed the story. I've enjoyed it for the first time, and I think this is the third or fourth submission I've had the pleasure to read, even though it is not necessarily an enjoyable topic. I think the story is, I don't know, it's personal to me on a few different levels, because I've had relationships that feel like they're very similar to the one between the protagonist and Eric. So that's probably what I love most about it. I like the depth of emotion and the way the story explores the relationship between the two characters and the meaning that their friendship had. And I think it's well written. And I guess the only thing that I would talk about is it's a new paragraph, and I think it's the next to last paragraph, where the protagonist wonders, if they should have done more to prevent Eric's suicide, and it seems out of context with the rest of the story, or it seems unjustified in a way, those thoughts, and not that any person might not have thoughts or doubts about having been able to do more, but when you look at that paragraph in the context of the rest of the story, it seems out of place in a way, because it seems like the protagonist did do everything possible to try to, kind of connect and help this person, and it doesn't seem like it was on them. So it doesn't seem like it fits within the rest of the story, I guess. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. That was great. Let's go ahead and move on to Nichole. One positive thing and at least one thing you'd like to talk about.
I always like Jared's writing. He writes so smoothly and he's easy to follow. And when I hear he comes up, I look forward to his writing. I like the way it flowed. I struggled with, I felt that at the end, the regrets were what a normal person would feel, but I still struggled with it. And that's something I would like to explore more. Again, the piece flowed, but I struggled with the lasting of the person feeling like, I regret not doing anything and I have all these feelings. And to me, it somewhat seemed normal, but I really struggled with that. So that's something I would like to discuss a little bit more.
Thank you, Nichole. Colin, what about you?
Yeah, I would agree that it was really deep. It was sad, but I think that was appropriate given the story. And from what I remember last time, I felt like this version of it, I got a much better sense of like the relationship between the characters. From what I recall, it seemed like unclear how good of friends were they actually, but it definitely came through in this one that they shared a lot of experiences. But I think just in mentioning some of those experiences, I think that it was hard for me to imagine Eric in those situations. There was a lot of things that were thrown out. But I guess I was just left wondering, like, he seems so distant and aloof in the current scene that I just wonder, like, if he was like that in the flashbacks or if he was just a totally different person before then. And then I think I also had some questions around the narrator, as far as there were like a couple mentions of him dealing with his own struggles or his own pain, and it just got alluded to a few times. And I feel like if it's going to be brought up as like that was also a factor in them becoming more distant, then maybe we should get a little more information or a little more detail to kind of flesh that out.
Thank you, Colin. Grace. Oh, you're muted, Grace. Should I be stalling for time here, Jared? Oh, never mind. All right, Grace.
So I also agree with Nichole that it flowed really easily, flowed really nicely, and read really easily, and I enjoyed it. I didn't feel a whole lot of sympathy. I'd like to feel more sympathy for the protagonist. I'd like to feel more of his love for Eric. I didn't feel that so much. So when he got the news of the suicide, I wasn't, I would really like to have seen their memories more than just a mention, like, for instance, that they played it on Sunset Strip together. I would like to have actually seen that and been there and felt it being more visceral, feel more of a part of it, of their relationship and their friendship, so that I could feel his love for Eric, and then I could feel sad for him. So that's what I felt like the main thing that, the main piece of it that was really missing for me.
That was great. Thank you, Grace.
Sure.
Eli, what about you? What are your thoughts?
I thoroughly enjoyed it again, the second time as well. I really felt like the relationship, for what we're given, like in the space that we're given, I thought that was very strong. I thought that the way they communicated, Eric and the protagonist communicated, really kind of encapsulated what seemed like their relationship at the time. However, I'd also agree with Grace in that I feel like I would love to know more about the relationship. So I was there's like a few not really kind of felt like mentions of like previous trips with Eric. And well, I guess I'm not saying that it needs more, but I feel like what you could do is, if you wanted to, you could expand the story quite a bit to fully delve into that. I'm not necessarily saying that you should, but I think that is an option if you would like to kind of expand this to a much longer, like I was thinking even like novella/novel type. It seems like their relationship has gone through so much that you have that much like story behind it. So yeah.
Let me clarify with you. Are you saying that you felt the story could be fleshed out more? Is that what you mean?
No, so I feel like this is great as a short story, but I also feel like if you wanted to, you could make it longer. So just because there's so much information in this short story, it seems like there's a lot, and like this relationship is so interesting that I feel like if you wanted to, it's not really a complaint or a recommendation. I just feel like it could be, if you wanted to make this a long piece. I feel like there's enough information in it. There's enough. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, and I'm sure that's wonderful to hear. It's always great to hear about
Am I
the
allowed
stories.
to?
Oh, go ahead, Grace.
can I chime in there?
Well, usually we do, everybody does a minute and then we go into the group discussion.
Got
Is it something you can say
No, no, I
quickly?
just was gonna, I'll wait till the group discussion.
Okay,
Sorry.
great. No, you're good, Grace. Thank you, Eli. So did you have anything you wanted to discuss specifically? Maybe I didn't hear it.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. I don't think I added that onto the end. No, not particularly, I think. Actually, for the most part, I'd be interested to hear what other people would like to discuss so far, but I don't have anything to add to that, I would say.
All right. There's so much great critique that we've heard so far. I feel every idea, most of the ideas have been said better than I wrote them down. So the one thing that I noticed, well, okay, I have a laundry list of compliments, but I know Jared hates compliments, so I won't even bother. No, let me. First of all, I've read a number of Jared's pieces, and so this is coming as a point of comparison, and maybe isn't fair to say because I'm supposed to read this one without that context. But the writing in this feels so clean, and there's only 2 or 3 maybe clunky things, and not even clunky because they're grammatically clunky, but just they don't feel as polished as every other sentence. And I just, as I was reading it, I kept getting hit by these wonderful, simple, clean, well-structured, cool observations that I enjoyed. I the second time through and the third time through, I just that struck me every single time. And I also felt like the story moves through action and backstory and personal reflection without losing the thread of the voice, which I think is difficult, and I think is a huge compliment to the author that they were able to do that. That it didn't ever feel in this short space like the author was like it's in chunks. It felt all like one piece, even though it moves through these very clearly distinct layers of the history and then the action and then the character's emotional reflection. And so, yeah, I just wanted to say I appreciated that. The thing I'll mention as something I want to discuss is the narrative focus, or maybe the emotional focus that I think Colin mentioned. Oh God, I'm probably attributing it to the wrong person. Somebody mentioned the beautiful. I think it was Brad actually. The emotional strength, the emotional core of the character, of the bond between the two characters, and how well that's fleshed out. And Eli mentioned that as well. And the critique I would have, or the thing I'd want to discuss, is the story explores love and dreams and drug use and suicide and fallen friendships and a host of big concepts, and a lot of them are given similar amounts of space, and it made it hard for me to feel that we were talking about one thing the whole time. But Grace, let me bring you back in.
Hi. Okay, so I was just, when Eli mentioned the thing about making it more into a novel, wait, Edean, it's the same thing. This is a stupid question. Edean, are you Dean?
Yeah.
That's
You're doing good.
Okay. I was just curious. I mean, I'm new, so relatively new, so I just didn't know. And all right, thanks. So that's what I thought. Anyway, when he said the thing about making it, or it has the potential for a novel, I also felt that primarily because it spans, it really spans years, because at the ending, it's like 3 years later or something after their encounter. So I was wondering, I had a thought to make it maybe a little bit more of to give it a little smaller of a piece of time, if you want to keep it as a short story. Just a suggestion, because to me it feels a little bit more like there's so much in there, but nothing's really that much in depth, in terms of really showing the events and that sort of thing, really making the memories, showing a little more. So I was thinking that maybe, you know, I thought maybe starting with the suicide would have been a real good thing to do, because I think it would be easier to hook the reader in. And but making it, maybe, if this makes any sense, making it shorter in time wise, but also or maybe making it him finding out about the suicide. That's what I meant to say. And making it shorter in time wise, though. Just a thought.
Thank you, Grace. And I should have said this after Eli's mentioned making the story longer, but I was hoping not to give any pretense of admonishment. So I hope you don't take it that way either. But I will say that generally, unless the author okays it, we try not to make suggestions about what the author could do, and instead just
Okay.
describe our
That's right.
experience, and then the author can
Sorry.
interpret it however
I
they
got
want.
it.
Yeah, that's
Okay,
right. My bad.
okay. All right.
Um,
So another way to put that would have
Okay.
been that it felt a little bit more like a novel, in that it spanned a lot of time. Does that make sense?
that was perfect.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so, and I think Eli would probably, I don't know if he'd echo that or not. Eli?
Wrong button. Yes, I would say, yeah, yes, I echo that.
All right. Okay, we've got some consensus. So I will go ahead and I'll begin with the first topic that was brought up. It was brought up by both Brad and Nichole, and it was the reflection of the character of the narrator at the end and the regret specifically expressed by that character in that section. I know, Brad, I'll come to you first. You had mentioned that it felt out of place, in part, at least, because the protagonist had done so much.
Yeah, but it wasn't, I don't think it was, it wouldn't be regret. It would be just and it's that last large paragraph on page 8. And, the protagonist didn't feel like, he expresses, there's thoughts expressed or ideas expressed, like he should have done more.
Is it the-
That Eric had, accepted him, and that, what is it? He says, all I'd done was get upset, and it hadn't been his fault. And it's true, maybe it wasn't necessarily Eric's fault for what happened. But at the same time, I do feel like, at least in the context of this story, what's on the written page, the protagonist is the one that reached out to Eric. The protagonist makes multiple attempts to connect with Eric, and it is because it's written in the first person, we're getting everything from the narrator's perspective, but the narrator is genuinely concerned with Eric's well-being, loves Eric. And I feel like the narrator does as much as they possibly can do for Eric, to help Eric. And Eric doesn't accept it. And I guess it's natural. I think feeling grief over the loss of a friend or a loved one is totally natural. And feeling like you didn't do enough is also natural. Like, you could have done more, but I guess, I don't know. I feel like when I read this paragraph, I feel like the paragraph is written in such, what's the word? With such certainty, that I didn't do enough. I should have done more. I failed Eric. And I think what I would have preferred is, kind of being inquisitive about, had I done enough? Is there something more I could have done? Could have I reached out in a different way? Because I definitely feel like, I feel for the protagonist. I also feel for Eric, but I definitely feel like that Eric wasn't going to accept anything. And so I don't know. It seemed out of place with the rest of the piece where the narrator was actively trying to engage with Eric, build some connection, and then this paragraph just comes up and it's like, I failed Eric, is what it kind of said to me. And like I said, it seemed to break with the rest of the piece. If my interpretation is correct.
Grace, did you have a response? It seemed like you wanted to jump in there.
Oh, I wanted to clarify what paragraph he was talking about, but I found it.
Oh, all right. Does anybody have anything to say in response to what Brad just brought up about the certainty of the character's regret, possibly feeling a little bit out of place, given how much he'd done to try to reconnect with Eric?
Yeah, I agree with Brad where it's more of a statement versus a question. I kind of that's where I felt a little off with it. I think with the way Brad described it more as him questioning, could I have done enough? Instead of saying, or what could I have done differently? And the regret felt, it felt like it needed more questioning versus more of a statement. And I would really like the way Brad phrased that, because that's exactly how I was feeling. It was feeling like, yeah, that seems normal, but there's something not quite, it doesn't really feel, there's something missing. So I really think the way, again, Brad phrased that was perfect. I would feel more comfortable if it was made as a question versus a statement. That makes sense. I see Brad's expression, and I'm not saying it makes sense. Jared says
No,
sense.
it doesn't. It makes perfect sense to me. When I think about the origin of this story, I want to be respectful and say, if that's how the protagonist, feels, then the protagonist has every, obviously, a person's feelings are a person's feelings. But in the context of what's on the written page, it doesn't, I guess I would like more explanation as to, or more understanding, I guess, of why the protagonist felt this way. And maybe it's not even possible to get that, in which case it's just so heartbreakingly sad, to think about being in the situation where you feel responsible for something that obviously was beyond your control.
I would like to
Colin?
ask this question just to clarify.
Oh.
Did it seem like the
Let's bring in the
protagonist-
author to clarify this.
Here he comes. Here he is. Did it seem like the protagonist thought they were somehow responsible for what happened? Is that how it came across?
I didn't get that. I just get that he's feeling bad. But normally I want to feel bad for him, but because I don't feel a great love in this relationship, I don't. So I would have liked to have seen those memories, actually seen them playing together, on Sunset Strip, to really have been there for the memories and for the relationship, so I could feel the loss, so I could feel the sorrow. But I don't get that he feels guilty, that he feels responsible.
I got, oh, are you done, Grace? I want to wait till you're done.
Yeah. Thanks, Nichole.
I got the feeling he felt guilty. I get the feeling that he didn't feel like he had done enough. I mean, that really came across that it kind of bothered me because it felt like it was unnecessary guilt. But a lot of times when people die and they've committed suicide and you've known them, you do feel that. I've had a couple of people in my life commit suicide. So, or know of a couple of people, have known people who have committed suicide. So I guess for me, I did feel some unnecessary responsibility.
Colin?
Yeah. So my interpretation of that was that the character didn't feel responsible, but they did feel a lot of guilt. And there was a few mentions of the narrator having their own sort of mental health struggles with like depression or maybe something else. And I had mentioned earlier, I kind of would have liked more detail on that because I like while I agree and I understand that the feelings at the end may not be the correct feelings for someone who's naturally already like struggling with depression, then maybe it makes sense that they're feeling an additional amount of guilt that maybe is unjustified, but makes sense for that character.
Eli.
Yeah, I'd agree. My interpretation is definitely that there is some guilt there. Like I hadn't been there. That's a quote. He said, "I hadn't been there. I'd abandoned him out of fear." But it wasn't like responsibility because it's like I wasn't surprised he'd killed himself. Part of me had been waiting for that. So I felt like that it made sense in the context, at least that reaction would. However, it does, there is a lot more, that's like the most reflection I think we see in everything. There's not so much reflection, especially in a big chunk like that. So I guess in that way, it is definitely like a little different from the rest of the story. But it also feels relatively appropriate because it's towards the end. It kind of feels like it's wrapping it up. It's like the final processing by the protagonist. So yeah, it's interesting because it is like straight into his thoughts where we only get kind of snippets or more like memories, but this is like straight into thoughts. So yeah.
Yeah, I agree with what Eli just said, and I would say the character seems to very clearly feel responsible for Eric's death. There's a few sentences where he's like, "But I'd punished him for his inability to get out of it. After he'd ignored my last text about meeting up again, I'd made a conscious decision to stop trying to contact him. I was afraid that if he continued to reject me, I'd fall back in my own hole. Out of fear, I'd abandoned him. I wasn't surprised he killed himself. A part of my had been waiting for the call from his mom, and I'd done nothing." And all of those seem to reflect a clear sense of responsibility and the failure to do more. So I would say I think the character absolutely demonstrates responsibility, and I don't have any comment on how much responsibility the character feels, although I do think that a number of the amazing critiques we've heard so far circle around the piece exploring a number of different things and not necessarily funneling them into a single thing. But the author wrote some great questions that I, as your moderator, failed to address. So let's get to those. And the first one is,
Oh, I want to
do the
just
story.
clarify something
Oh, go
really
ahead.
quick.
Go-
So
or Grace.
I do agree, though, rereading that, there is guilt, but not responsibility. Just wanted to clarify.
That's great. Thank you. Let's do the
Oh
do
my
the
God, I
story
needed a
and the
laptop.
what was that? All right. So, do the story and the protagonist feel like they have an arc? And if so, what would you say they are? Oh, difficult question to start. So, Colin.
I think the story sort of had an arc. It definitely was like non-linear because it kind of started at the end, so it wasn't like traditionally what I would think of as an arc. But I think, not to harp on this again, but this is what I had written down, was that some details we were missing from the narrator, from their perspective. I think that's what would have kind of filled in the holes to give me an arc. And also I wasn't really sure where the first sentence fit into the chronology of the story, because the first sentence seemed a lot darker and a little more bleak than the last paragraph did. So I wasn't quite sure on like the progression of like that first sentence was how he felt at the 3 years later point, or if it was somewhere in between. So I think those are the things that prevented it from feeling like an arc, complete one.
Did you feel like the narrator had an arc?
I think it was hinted at, but I would have liked it to be a little more defined.
All right, Eli.
Yeah, I thought there was an arc. It was more of like maybe a emotional arc rather than so much plot. But I feel like the main arc would be the Eric coming over to Eric leaving, and kind of like the protagonist kind of gauging their friendship and seeing if like, are we going to be friends again or not? That kind of felt like the main arc that I saw. Of course, the other, and then there's also kind of a second storyline almost of like Eric committing suicide. And so when they play together like that, it felt like they're, yeah, an A and a B arc. Yeah, I don't think there's anything. I think that answers the question. So if there's more, I could say.
Nichole, did you feel like the story had an arc and or the character, the main character?
Mm, I don't think so necessarily. I mean, it seemed very, it didn't seem like there was like a high and a low. I mean, it just kind of kept flowing and it built a little bit, but I knew something was gonna kind of happen that was not gonna be, but I just really didn't feel like it had a arc. I mean, that's me.
Did you feel like the character had an arc at all?
I felt he had a few moods, emotions, but I felt he was pretty, yeah, I didn't feel that either.
Nichole, I always love you for your honesty. You give very clear answers to questions, and it's fantastic. And it looks like Brad may have gotten his internet lost, or he froze a little bit. I'm sure he'll be back soon. Grace, did you feel like the
Hi.
story had an arc and or the character had an arc?
I also I agree with Colin and with Nichole in that it didn't feel like much of an arc to me, story or character wise, because the story being non-linear, that made it difficult for the story to have, you know, a decisive arc. But also the character's emotions, feelings towards Eric seemed about the same as they did in the beginning. I think there was an opportunity for it. I'm not allowed to say. I feel like I shouldn't say, but
Oh, just anything you
okay.
feel that's not a suggestion is perfect. And you
Okay.
did such a great job of rephrasing it last time.
Okay, I feel like there'd be an opportunity to show him going from begrudging him for being kind of because Eric seems like an opportunist. Like in the beginning, when he's having that conversation, it's clear that it's just, he hints at the fact that he's an opportunist and that he's just thinking about himself, or that's what the protagonist does. So kind of begrudging him to having understanding for why he is that way, to sympathy. And I think that showing that before the suicide, before he finds out about the suicide, would have been really good. And then after the suicide, to be like, oh, now it makes sense. And, you know, that's where there's even more sympathy. But then I feel like there'd be an arc. So for him to grow as a character, to grow as the protagonist, to grow as a character, he would have to, you know, his emotions would have to have, not emotions, what's the word? I can't talk today, I'm so tired, but his feelings towards Eric and his emotions would have to evolve, you know, spiritually, like to go from a place of begrudging him because, you know, he's selfish, he's an opportunist, whatever, to understand him, to have compassion for him, and then to have sympathy for him. And to show that before the suicide, not after he kills himself, and then it's kind of a little bit, I feel like it's a little bit too late in a way. Like everyone feels bad after the suicide, but yeah, to really show that before would be an opportunity.
Oh, those are great comments, Grace. And I'll tell you a cheat that a lot of us use to get around the whole suggestion thing, if
Oh,
that's the only way we can do it. And that
yeah.
is to say what I would need to feel or what I would need to see in order to feel blah, blah, blah. And then you just say whatever you want.
Okay.
It's just a
Okay.
complete hack to get around the rules, but I offer it to you because we all
Okay.
use it. Brad, we were talking about a question from, I think you might have missed it when you cut out, was do the story
arc.
Oh, you got it. Story arc and character arc.
I heard yeah. I read the question and I heard you mention the story arc, character arc right before I had technical difficulties. And my sense of a story arc was that it was the protagonist's drive to reconnect with Eric. I thought it was fairly clear to me that in inviting Eric to the apartment, the protagonist, because Eric had clearly in the past been so close, been a source of I guess, feelings of self-worth and the lack of that friendship, the protagonist was fighting to get that back. So, the protagonist was trying to overcome these obstacles, either Eric's personality or Eric's disinterest or Eric's other interests, and trying to kind of rekindle the friendship. And so I thought that was the story arc that I saw.
That's fantastic. Did you feel there was a character arc? Or I guess you're saying maybe those are one and the same?
Yeah, I think they were one and the same. I think it'd be hard to differentiate in this case. I guess I might think if I think of a character arc as in the sense of like personal growth and a story arc is just the plot, then I guess I would say I didn't see a character arc versus a plot story arc. I saw the protagonist fighting for the friendship, but I'm not sure if there was an emotional arc or not. If there's a difference, I guess I'll say.
No, I think that answers the question really well. And I will say we are having a wonderful problem. We have so many fantastic criticisms, and everybody's doing such a great job of answering the questions that we are running a little bit out of time. So we have 3 more questions to get through.
I have a different questions to
And I would love to bring the author in. Please, Jared, what was your question?
I forget those questions are terrible. So the first, so I've been trying to work on this post sending it out, and I have some questions about things that I'm thinking about. And one of them relates to something that you mentioned, Edean, around lots of different things happening. Lots of topics come up, and lots of big questions or big themes maybe are possible. And I wanted to center it more around male vulnerability, and kind of that's something that I think is in there now, but not really emphasized. And so I'm wondering if people think that is a promising direction to go in terms of bringing that up more. I would also, I think, hopefully go towards the idea of why the protagonist feels a bit more guilty maybe than it seems like they should, because it kind of peeks into moments where they see that vulnerability is possible and that they could perhaps help somehow by broaching something difficult, and they don't. And so I'm kind of wondering if people see that as a potential theme, and if that could help with a bit of a mishmash.
All right, pick your first victim. Who do you want to answer it first?
You.
Oh, dang it. I set myself up for that. All right. I would say so. First of all, there are absolutely some places where you explore male vulnerability. In fact, after you mention it explicitly, a bunch of them came to mind immediately. There's a moment where the character mentions that in male friendships, I don't think the word vulnerability is used. Oh no, it is. No vulnerability allowed, which I didn't agree with, but I appreciated was the character's point of view. So I guess it doesn't matter that I didn't agree with it, but it's mentioned. And then there are other places where the protagonist, the main character, specifically mentions Eric made him feel like he could be himself and he could explore. He could be that he made him feel accepted. And each one of those is a demonstration of vulnerability. Toward the end, the main character cries or choke. I think he's crying. He's like sobbing into his girlfriend's lap or her arm, which is a clear demonstration of vulnerability. I think it's certainly a theme or a motif or a through line. If would I say that was the main focus of the story right now? No, probably not. Is that a promising area to explore? I mean, it's fertile ground, certainly, and it would be not new, but interesting to see in this time and place explored, especially with this topic. I think it's perfect. Um, I don't. I think if I guess. Well, I guess that's it. That's really my answer. So I will shunt it off to Grace. Did you what did you think about the story and male vulnerability?
About the vulnerability thing, there was a little bit of a contradiction because in the beginning they're talking and he says, oh, men in friendships are they have their guard up with their vulnerability. He says something like that. And then little later on, he says that was something that was really attractive to him about Eric, that he could be vulnerable around him. So I felt a little bit confused, like, and that kind of tripped me up a
Could you
little.
tell me where? I'm sure it does happen. I just need to be pointed out.
It was a sentence in the beginning. Oh, well, this is the sentence where I made the comment. I could open up to him about how unworthy of anyone's friendship I'd felt when we graduated college and how he'd helped me out of that hole by inviting me into his life. So that's when he's kind of reflecting back. But above that, when they're first together, he says something like, we adhered to the primary dictum governing male friendships, no vulnerability allowed.
And so
just feels a little bit of a contradiction.
I want to make it more clear. So the protagonist doesn't end up bringing that up. They don't mention that. They say they could open up to him about it, and then they don't. And I'm wondering how that could, because that's not the first time someone's given me that note. So you're definitely
I'm sorry.
right.
I think there's.
So I'm wondering, okay, is the fact that the protagonist is thinking that they could open up to this person, does that make it seem like it's kind of contradicting that opening statement?
Well, the statement, okay, it says throughout the countless hours, the one we'd adhere to the primary dictum.
Yeah, get that one.
That but then a little bit later it says when they were friends in college that he could open up to him about how unworthy of anyone's friendship he felt.
Oh, I see.
That's
the
a
confusion
vulnerability.
No, the confusion is that
So
the language I meant to use is that I could, in the moment in that scene, I could open up to him about it. Not in the past. I could open up to him
potentially.
Exactly. So it's just it's a language thing. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Yeah.
Because you're not the first person to give me that note. And so you're
Okay,
totally
yeah,
right.
yeah. So that's
don't worry.
A
I'm
little
not
note
attacking.
there. I said, oh, it's a little bit of a contradiction because you're saying,
Yes, that makes total sense. That makes 100% sense. Thank you thank you.
Oh, sure.
Oh, I didn't have to involve myself in that at all. That was perfect.
And then one of the questions,
Grace.
Is it okay to go on to the second?
Well, let's see.
I'm just looking at the time. Oh, got it.
Let's see. The author, did you want us to keep answering that question? Jared?
We are running out of time, so I have
male vulnerability.
I'm running out of time, so I wanted to get to a couple other ones that aren't the ones I mentioned. in my my email.
Oh,
Um, so the other things I was wondering was, did anyone feel that when the rent was mentioned, in terms of saying that the protagonist paid the rent for Eric, did that trip anybody up, or did people take away from that? What did people take away from that? I guess what was the takeaway from seeing that, that part of the story, or was it just kind of
Let me move
forgettable?
that to Colin and Nichole. I'll start with Nichole. Did you what did you feel? Did the rent thing trip you up? What did you get away? What did you get from that?
The rent thing. Oh, the rent thing felt it ah, it felt like it would kind of happen. I mean, so it's like, hey, I'm gonna pay you back, but can I borrow money? So to me, it didn't trip me up so much. It was more like, yeah, this guy's trying to, I mean, that's how I felt about it. It was like, yeah, he's trying. He's one of those that I'm not gonna pay the rent. I'm not gonna do anything, and but I got this great investment, and if you do this great investment, it just showed what kind of friendship it was. It showed that the guy wasn't really interested. It showed that he was kind of I hate to say it this way, but he was kind of a douche. He was a scammer. He was just one of those guys that you're like, oh yeah, you're a tool, you're my friend, but I've known you forever and we smoke a little pot with you. So it flipped that fit for me.
All right,
yeah,
Colin.
I thought it was.
Oh, go ahead, Grace.
I'm so sorry.
No, you're doing great. I wanted to bring in Colin and Nichole just because they haven't spoken as much.
Okay.
But I want to hear what you have to
Yeah,
say.
I agree. It felt like it was a little window into his who he is as a character, Eric.
I totally would
Done.
agree with that, Grace. What about you, Colin? What would you say?
Yeah, I thought it was okay. It was a little different than some of the other things. I felt like the other reasons why they drifted away were a little more nebulous and vague, and I felt like that kind of fit with the tone of the story. The rent thing felt like a little more practical, which I guess could make sense. It makes sense in reality, but I guess it just kind of tone-wise, it was a little bit separate from the rest of just kind of this slow drifting apart.
I agree.
Eli?
Yeah, I think I'd have to agree with Colin there. I don't think I have as much to say on this piece at this point, though. I think it's been pretty well stated at this point.
All
So
right.
it's okay. Yeah.
No, that's perfect. Brad, do you want to give a thumbs up to the rent thing? Felt like a. Go ahead.
It felt fine. It didn't trip me up. I think that's what Jared's question was. It makes money in male psychology and feeling like you owe something to someone or you can't pay your own way. Jesus, that is such a powerful thing, and the way our minds worked, and then like in American society, I mean, the fact that it could affect their friendship, I think is fairly clear. So, I mean, just the fact that there was this issue with rent and Eric wasn't, able to pay for the rent, and the protagonist, kind of paid his way for a little while. I don't need a full explanation. We can't get Eric's perspective, because he's not the narrator. Or a POV character, so we don't know what he's thinking or how it affected him. But the fact that it did affect him and did affect the relationship in some way, I think is it makes sense to me. I can believe it, and so yeah, I don't think bringing the rent into the story, it didn't confuse me in any way or anything else. I mean, it seemed to be part of the greater concept of their friendship, and it's 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 their separation, I guess, for lack of a better term.
All right, I'm jumping in again. So I do have a one more kind of question I wanted to ask everybody, and that was at the end. There's a couple scenes. There's one where it's not even a scene. I guess that's the question. Where Eric is said, Eric's mom calls, and then it's kind of it's summarized what happened, right? You know, the protagonist asks what happened, and then there's a bit of a summary of that. Did people have any desire to see more of what happened in scene, or was it something that was fine and effective as it was going to be in summary?
Grace.
I definitely wanted to see more. I wanted to see it in scene. And it made me feel distant, just to hear it in summary like that I didn't feel, again, I want to have more sympathy for this character because I'm sure he's like suffering and, with this whole thing. But, so it would make me feel a lot more if I could, get I'd like to see the phone call and how he responded, what he felt in his body when he got the news, where he felt it, how he processed it. That's important. You can't just, I didn't mean to say that. I mean,
No, that was perfect because what you said was what I want to see is what I would need. I was literally about to compliment you on how well you phrased that.
Okay.
Eli.
I'm sorry, I got frozen in the headlight. Could you please remind me of the
Of course,
question?
yeah, I should have been doing that from the beginning, so
Sorry.
don't feel bad at all. The question was about the scene where the protagonist speaks to Eric's mom, and there's a bit of a summary as to what the protagonist learned from Eric's mom. And the question from the author was, would you want to see a scene where that's happening? Like you want to see the dialogue and the feelings and all that?
I feel like there was one before. I think there was a very short scene in the last. No? Okay, I'm getting some. No? Okay. And I thought we decided, I thought that it was there before and it's not here this time. But I might be wrong.
I'm having the same Manda thing effect. What's that called? Not Mandalorian.
Mandalorian.
You know what I'm talking about? The
Mandela
effect. Yeah, I have the same Bernstein Bears experience you are. Yeah, I thought that was in there in the previous draft
We
as well.
talked about whether it should be a scene. It still wasn't, and people were kind of fine with it. And I'm kind of second guessing myself around not so much showing the phone call and kind of the back and forth with the mom. In my mind, I know maybe that would be interesting. I feel that's a little boring, personally. I meant more seeing in a scene Eric doing what he does, and just kind of having that be more shot by shot as opposed to kind of like he did this, he went here, this happened, and the next thing. Or does that feel a bit I don't know, what's the word, lurid? I don't know what the word is for that. Like I'm trying to profit from pain or something. If I show it, am I kind of doing the reality TV thing?
Okay, is that scene exploitative, and or would you want to see it?
The scene of talking with mom.
Yeah, after the death. Yeah.
After the death. No.
And the scene of seeing, so basically seeing Eric in the parking garage, kind of going back and forth and kind of thinking about it, or does that feel kind of like almost exploitative is exactly the word I was thinking. Couldn't think of. So
yeah, I think that since it's from that third person point of view, I think stepping into that, it wouldn't match with what is going on so far. Since the whole story has been told from the outsider's perspective, I think jumping in there.
It would still be from the outsider's perspective. Basically, I'm sorry to keep clarifying, but I want to make sure I'm clear. Is basically the mom says that there was a video tape of what happened, and so there are some specifics that are known, and so kind of using those as the narrator, kind of almost imagine what it would have been like,
Oh,
from the third
oh,
person,
oh, he must have. Okay. Oh, wow. Ooh, that would be really painful. I think that would be, man. I feel like it's possible. I think if the narrator like would truly, wow, oh man, I don't know, that one's really hard. Oh man,
You don't have to answer
yeah,
it, Eli,
sorry,
or
I
you can
can't,
take a minute if you like.
I'll keep thinking about it and
All
come
right,
back to that.
hard pass. Nichole, what about you? Do you want to see the suicide through whatever vehicle the author would choose to explore it?
I would like to explore more of the suicide. Yeah, that is in the way where the author would go with that. Whether it's more feelings or whether it's more, how to process it as a man, because he kind of talked about those kinds of things. And that's where I would like to go more of that, especially if you want to, Jared. I'm not phrasing it correctly. You talked about more of the expression of male feelings and things like that, and not feeling how do and those kinds of things. That would be very fascinating for me. So I would like to hear more of that, because there is a social norm that men are supposed to be, if you look at Brene Brown, they're supposed to be heroes and robots, and they're not really supposed to have feelings and vulnerability. So to explore that through the suicide and the feelings around that would be very fascinating and very enlightening in a lot of aspects for me.
Thank you, Nichole. Colin, what about you?
Personally, I don't feel like it's necessary to draw it out in a scene. I kind of like the existing structure where the main scene is their last visit together. I feel like pretty much everything is in there, and also since you start out the way that you start it, we already know that he kills himself, or at least Eric is dead and some sort of tragedy happens. So I didn't really want or need it to be dragged out any longer than you had it.
All right, I should let everybody know it is 8:03, so if you need to leave, don't feel like you have to stay. But Brad, I know you haven't had a chance to answer this question.
Bye, guys.
Are you heading out, Grace? Okay.
I am
Bye,
heading
Grace.
out. I have to go. Bye. And when I send you this stuff, Jared, I send you the notes.
Thank you, Grace, for joining. It's nice to not be the
Nicole.
only woman here. So goodbye.
I know.
I'm always surrounded by these guys.
It's so nice to have another female in the group. All right. Bye, guys.
Good night.
Good night. Okay. Brad, the question of, did you want to see the suicide explored more?
Yeah. No, I don't. Well, yeah, I feel like that's a slightly different question or context than what Jared asked. But no, I don't need to see a more vivid description or visualization of the suicide, or try to get into Eric's head. I mean, I think a summary of the actual, suicide and scene in the parking garage is enough. I feel like the story is more about grief for the friendship, and I don't know that a more in-depth retelling of the actual act of suicide would help that. But I guess just for the record, I felt in reading the story, I felt like the protagonist actually saw the video at some point. And so the details that were provided in the story made me think that that the protagonist had actually, seen a copy of the video at some point. And if it was just that Eric's mother told the protagonist about what happened, that was not clear to me. And I don't know that that would even make a difference, but it might. But if the decision is to make this a summary, I think, and if that's what happened, then I think that would make it more clear that, you know, Eric's mom said, this is what happened.
That's what I was going for.
Okay.
That, yeah. So I need to make it a little more clear.
Yeah, and that was not clear to me. I thought the protagonist saw the video.
Thank you, Brad. Okay, submitting author. Do you have any more questions you want to ask us?
Oh, can I finally talk? Thank you. No, you answered all of them. It's past time. Everyone was pretty here on time. I appreciate everyone's comments. Awesome as always. So yeah, just thank you.
All right. Well, this was another night of the Critiquery. We will see you guys. Well, not everybody, but some people next Tuesday. Nichole?
What
Yes.
about all these questions we didn't get to?
The author tossed those out. He said, no, these are terrible.
If you
Because,
wanted,
Brad,
if you
your awesomeness just exuded so much, you know, that, okay, well, then we'll give it to Eli. If you don't want to be awesome, well, I'll give it to Colin.
I'll send an email, Eric, or Jared, I mean, I'm sorry.
Eric, oh no. The two of them, I had to be him. Crap. All right.
All right, yeah, if you want to answer
thank
the
you.
questions, please feel free to email them to Jared. I'm sure he would love to read about them. But otherwise, thank you everybody so much.
You
And
guys
we'll
are
see
so awesome. I appreciate you. Thank you very much. You're a highlight of my Tuesday evening.
Oh, we appreciate you. Thanks, Nicole.
Yes.
Thank you, Nichole.
And good night, everyone. It was
Good night.
always a pleasure as always. And no, Nichole, I'm happy to accept compliments and suggestions of awesomeness. Don't want to go to anyone else.
Good night, everybody.
Good night,
Good
everybody.
night.
See you later.